Shana Tova, everyone. So Mendel has been a devout and practicing Orthodox Jew his whole life. Born into a strict family, he's never so much as tasted non-kosher food, never looked at an image that would raise an eyebrow, never even thought a thought that wasn't about the Torah. Until at age 65, he wakes up one morning and decides that, having been such a paragon of virtue his whole life, he deserves just one weekend, one time to veer off the path. So, Friday morning, he goes out of town to the barber, shaves off his beard and his payas. He goes to the mall and buys the first clothes that he's ever owned that weren't black and white. Tight blue jeans, a loud Hawaiian shirt, some Ray-Ban sunglasses, and a pair of snakeskin boots. He goes to the local car rental and rents a cherry red convertible Corvette. And he drives straight to Las Vegas. Some of you see where this joke is going, right? He plays the tables, he makes a killing, he takes his earnings, and he sees a few shows. He goes to the buffet and he tries one of everything, and I mean everything. So on Sunday morning, satisfied that he's had enough, Mendel gets back in his car and he heads home. But as he pulls out of Las Vegas, he loses control of his car, careens off of a high mountain cliff. Instantaneously, he winds up in heaven. Given his turn to appear before God, he cries, "But God, why? I was good my whole life, pious in every way. For this one weekend of transgressions, you would strike down righteous Mendel." And God says, wait a minute, Mendel? Mendel? Oh, I'm so sorry. I guess I didn't recognize you. You guys laughed way more than the early service, by the way, just so you know. If you're looking for that online, it's Old Jewish Joke number 649. By the way, that's not true. I just told a lie. The idea that God wouldn't recognize pious Mendel ought to give us cause to stop for a moment and wonder whether or not God would recognize us today. Part of the purpose of these Yamim Noraim, these awe-filled days, and particularly this peak day of Yom Kippur, is to examine ourselves. How have we done in the last year? What are the ways that we are reflecting our highest selves? And in what ways have we perhaps strayed too far? There is a central image in the prayers that we've said on Rosh Hashanah and throughout the day today. In the section Unetana Tokef, we read, V'chol bai olam ya'avrun lefanecha kivnei maron. On these days of awe, all people on earth pass before God, kivnei maron, which our Machzor translates as like sheep before their shepherd. The image is striking. God, the shepherd, is inspecting each and every one of us on these days, and the metaphor continues, we pass under the staff. On the one hand, this could be terrifying, waiting in line for our moment of scrutiny. But on the other, this image of God as a shepherd is meant, I believe, to give us a sense of being cared for, seen, understood, and known for the individual that we are. This may come as a shock to some of you, but I am by no means an expert on livestock. I know, right? Most of my experience with sheep comes either from nursery rhymes or from the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival, which is awesome. You should check it out in May, right? But something I do know is that an expert shepherd can tell the difference between each of their animals. If you ask me, I am likely to say that a sheep is a sheep is a sheep. However, at the festival, there are competitions to crown the finest examples of every single subtype of sheep. I personally can't spot the difference between a black Romney and a border Leicester, but I am positive that any shepherd worth their salt can. And to be completely transparent, when I go to Sheep and Wool, I'm actually most interested in checking out all the shofars and potential, right? Someday, maybe. We'll see. Like sheep before their shepherd, we pass under the staff to be examined. What are our flaws, our virtues, our best and worst characteristics? On this day, we imagine that God examines, numbers, and considers one at a time every single soul. One commentator points out that in theory, a God with infinite power could consider our souls with total specificity all at once. Why would God need to do something so inefficient as inspect us one by one? But answering their own question, this commentator claims that God's purpose in examining each soul separately is actually to help us see ourselves better. Our individual time under the critical gaze empowers us with a deeper self-awareness. The image that God devotes time and energy and consideration of every soul individually on these days ought to inspire us to take God's lead. We who are made b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. We must see ourselves clearly and take the time to appreciate the uniqueness of each and every person we encounter. Now, this is incredibly challenging in the world that we live in. So much of modern culture is geared toward us seeing generalities, formulas, sound bites, and memes. We move through our days putting people into categories, compartmentalizing our experiences, and filtering out the distinctions that make an individual just that. We scroll endlessly through status updates and pictures of hundreds or thousands of friends, hardly pausing until something momentarily captures our attention, but then we're on to the next funny dog video. Our ability to give full and undivided attention to one single person in this world is a rare luxury at best. So I was recently invited to speak to a large interfaith conference to address delegates gathered from around the world. And as I sat on the stage, a representative of the sponsoring agency gave my introduction. It was lovely. I mean, really, really nice. They talked about the ways that I bring people together and lead my synagogue community, my involvement with interfaith activities. They waxed poetic about my genuine warmth and engaging style. My head, right? You know how they say, don't believe your own press? Well, I was pretty far down that path when suddenly I realized that I had heard this intro before. You see, I'd actually read it before when a rabbi that I knew the previous week had posted up on their Facebook wall that they had asked ChatGPT to write a short bio of them. It gets better. I also read the response from another rabbi that I know who pointed out that ChatGPT wrote pretty much the same bio of them as well. And the intro being given for me, I have to be honest, it was word for word exactly the same, with the exception of my name and temple Isaiah. You see, it's not that anything that they said was patently false, but I was left perplexed by that moment. And the worst part is that the individual who was introducing me is a person I actually know quite well. It's someone that I've worked with on community issues for years, a person I genuinely care for, who had told me earlier in the day how honored they were to introduce me to their community, and yet they had trusted ChatGPT for my bio. I don't know if they ran out of time, or if they were handed this copy by the conference organizers, or simply didn't think that anyone would know the difference. And to be honest, for quite a while, I also didn't know the difference. But when I did, it brought home for me one of the greatest dangers of this world of artificial intelligence. In an era increasingly driven by elements of AI, what does it mean to be human? How can we reaffirm and lift up the belief that every human being is made b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God and not in the image of ChatGPT? To be totally transparent, in preparation for today, I, of course, asked ChatGPT to craft a Yom Kippur sermon on the dangers of AI and the need to see people as individuals. It's my first time using ChatGPT, by the way. I was astonished as the text poured out on the screen before me at a rate that my eyes couldn't even keep up with. And it actually would have been a fairly passable sermon for a first-year rabbinic student to deliver. There was a structure, there were references to Jewish values, even some fairly good rabbinic sources in there. But I can tell you with absolute precision what the sermon was missing. In a word, It lacked heart, which is not its fault. It was written by something with infinitely more knowledge and facts than I can ever hope to cram into my limited noggin, but it was also written by something that is neither human nor alive. And frankly, let you in a little secret, ChatGPT is not a very good rabbi. There is lots of discussion about the ways in which artificial intelligence is a threat to job security across various sectors of employment. Just as the debates about automation were real from the time of the Industrial Revolution forward, these are serious and consequential conversations. But the likelihood that any of you would like for some robot rabbi to show up in your hospital room, or to sit and calm the nerves of the B'nai Mitzvah students before they stand on the bima, or maybe for some kind of a hologram to join partners under the chuppah as they affirm their love for each other, is very low. There are reasons for rabbis to worry about job security, but being fully replaced by AI isn't one. Yet. You've got more time in the game than I do, so you never know how technology is going to go. Less than a year since its release, the topic of ChatGPT and the havoc that it's wreaking on so many arenas is incredible. I sympathize with those middle school teachers having to determine whether their students have labored over a book report or if they instructed a chatbot analyze the themes of The Great Gatsby. Of course, like every powerful tool, AI can be turned around and used for good in the educational setting, as countless stories are reporting. I neglected to mention, by the way, that I could ask ChatGPT for a Yom Kippur sermon in the style of Dr. Seuss as well, right? So next year, if I wind up doing, I will not eat today with a goat, I will not eat today on a boat, you'll have found me out. New technologies are unearthing ethical dilemmas in every sector of society, from hospitals to courtrooms, transportation to warfare. The idea of unmanned drones controlled by AI deployed on the battlefield, making split-second targeting determinations, all happening perhaps independent of human judgment, gives us pause for consideration. But before I get out of my depth in a synagogue full of scientists and people who work at three-letter agencies, I'm going to return to the themes of the day. I see some of you sort of calculating in your heads your emails to me, so anyway. No, please do send them. Nearly 75 years ago, the modern-day prophet Abraham Joshua Heschel published a seminal short volume, The Sabbath. He addressed there the limitations and dangers of what he termed technical civilization. Incredibly prescient, his argument deserves careful consideration today. Building on the idea of Shabbat as a counterbalance against modern civilization's technological and commercial forces, Heschel describes the meaning that can be found through Shabbat observance. And I would generalize this to the participation in sacred community as we aspire to in the synagogue. Heschel writes, quote, "How proud we often are of our victories in the war with nature, proud of the multitude of instruments we have succeeded in inventing, the abundance of commodities we have been able to produce. Yet our victories have come to resemble defeats. In spite of our triumphs, we've fallen victims to the work of our hands. It is as if the forces we had conquered have conquered us." In our moment, would it be an improvement if I moved all of my sermons to being computer-generated sermons? I mean, to be perfectly honest, the ChatGPT version of this sermon was only 5 minutes long, so there are likely some of you who might happily exchange the human touch for extreme brevity, including some of my own family, I imagine. Right? Are we really better off living in a world with immediate access to all of recorded history and minimal appreciation for perspective and lessons to be gained from the past? All of these data points, but nothing to conclude from them. Do the satellites controlling countless drones, infinite and ever-present security cameras, leave us feeling any safer than we were before these technologies existed? Have our smartphones made us any wiser? I know for one, I personally cannot find the supermarket without GPS, so my answer is no. And yet, Heschel was perceptive enough to know that not only was technology here to stay, and only on the path of getting exponentially more complicated and advanced, but there was a tremendous potential for good inside every new development. He posits, quote, "The solution of humanity's most vexing problem will not be found in renouncing technical civilization, but in attaining some degree of independence from it." Every force, since the words, "let there be light," has the potential for good and evil. Our technical civilization calls upon us to manage our relationship with it, and this applies equally in the realm of the spiritual, the world of the synagogue. Let's be clear, I am grateful for technology, particularly the ways in which Zoom and streaming allowed us to remain connected through the darkest days of the COVID shutdown. On Rosh Hashanah and today, we have substantially more members of this community joining us online than we would have anticipated only a few months ago. And it's not only COVID related, as there are many, many legitimate reasons to join us for services online today. It warmed my heart after Rosh Hashanah services when I walked into my office and picked up my phone, and I saw a real-time text message from my daughter Eliana in her freshman year of college, and as we're spending the high holidays separated from one another for the first time in her life. And of course, the text message was a note of appreciation for my Taylor Swift references at the beginning of services, which just proved that she was listening. Thank you. And yet, I don't think that anyone would be spiritually fulfilled if synagogues existed solely online, never experiencing a congregation in real life. In the earliest days of Zoom services, a few Jewish community researchers predicted a permanent shift. They proclaimed that it was time to shutter nearly all the synagogues, put them up for auction. Instead, we could have 2 or 3 synagogue megacenters in the United States, maybe one per time zone, where all Reformed Jews would tune in from home. And while some of you undoubtedly and understandably enjoy occasionally tuning into the broadcasts from Central Synagogue in New York, it is not the same as being part of a synagogue community, as being part of your Temple Isaiah. Inspirational messages, glorious music, they've got them, and in a quality that we can only aspire towards. But we have something that you simply cannot experience as a one-way consumer of a broadcast service. We have a community where you are seen as an individual, where you matter and where you can bring your whole and authentic self. Together, we build something that cannot exist in virtual reality or mass distribution of a Shabbat live stream. The synagogue is, and has always been, a place to be appreciated for the gifts you bring, your blessings and the flaws that are a part of your core. Nobody is expected to show up whole or perfect. We are not lines of code or sequences of software. We are but flesh and blood, the pinnacle of creation, and as imperfect as God designed us. That is why Yom Kippur exists. In a world of perfection, there would be no need for corrective functions of the prayers and the rituals that we embrace on this day, no need to pass under the staff. Temple Isaiah, like so many other synagogue communities over the millennia, who endeavored to join people to one another to something higher and more transcendent than any one of us as individuals can reach, our Temple Isaiah is a place where we come, in good times and in moments of struggle and loss, to celebrate the seasons of the Jewish year, to learn alongside our friends and find inspiration in timeless stories, to affirm the ongoing tradition that asks us to uphold a set of values and principles and beliefs that governs the ways that we experience our world. This is a place that we continue, as generations before us, to bring the offerings of hearts and hands, where we find meaning through service, prayer, and community. Since the last High Holidays, my family has experienced the meaningful embrace of community in our time of deep sadness, as we mourn the loss of Pam's father, Saul Schenberg, who died the day before Rosh Hashanah last year. This community held us in care and comfort, and we are eternally grateful for that. And we've shared the joy in the last year of marking meaningful milestones as we gathered for my 10th anniversary here, observing through joyful song that moment in time. Pam and I noted that as terrible and sad as this year of mourning has been, the fact that we experienced it as part of a community softened that grief substantially. And we know that we're not alone. Many in this sanctuary and online confronted loss, illness, hardships of one kind or another over the last cycle of the Jewish year. The presence of your synagogue community likely brought an element of comfort, the knowledge that you are seen and held by others. I've heard this time and again, the ways in which fellow members of your community have stepped up, even people you did not formally know well, bringing an unexpected level of support and comfort. And if it's true in sorrow, it is similarly true in joy. Again and again, the highs, lows, and everything in between that we share in sacred community, we share it because this is the purpose of the synagogue. This is how we emulate our Creator, how we actualize the notion of being created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. We see, we notice, we share, we connect, and we are seen and noticed, drawn into connection and relationship. V'chol bai olam ya'avrun lefanecha kivnei maron. One by one, we pass beneath the staff of our shepherd, and we are considered one by one as the individuals we are, real and human, imperfect and whole, beautiful and broken. We bring our authentic selves to this sacred community on this day. And the image that strikes me as I think about it, as I imagine the shepherd and the staff, the visual that stops me in my path is that as we each pass beneath the staff and emerge on the other side, having been counted and considered by God, we join others in creating the sum total of parts, the eternal tapestry of Kehilat Yisrael, the broad and extended community of the Jewish people, joined to one another on this day and every other day, seeing one another as we're seen by God, as we see ourselves for the individuals that we are and the role that we play in making this place a holy and sacred community. We are not algorithms, lines of code, or faceless, nameless points on a graph. In this sacred place, we are seen for who we are, recognized for the gifts and the needs that we bring to this holy community. We enter as individuals on this sacred day, but we gather here as one, bound to each other through the sacred energy that we seek and find in this place. Ma tovu ohelecha Yaakov. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, these dwelling places of Israel that we are fortunate enough to inhabit. This place where we can be seen and known for who we truly are, and where we can emulate our shepherd as we genuinely recognize and see others as well. I wish to one and all a meaningful Yom Kippur, Gmar Chatima Tova. May we all be sealed for authentic wholeness and health in this new year, 5784.